You're watching Rise Up Against School Violence, a special presentation from Maine's Total Weather News coverage.
Welcome back to our conversation here. We are going to pick back up and start with the question, what do you guys think about arming teachers?
All right, so show of hands, who thinks arming teachers is a good idea in the current environment? Show of hands, yes for arming teachers. If you're against arming teachers, raise your hand. Okay, so those four, go ahead and explain what you're thinking.
Well, being a teacher, I absolutely believe that it needs to be a local controlled decision. I wouldn't want to see any sort of state or federal mandate to do so. The majority of the teachers that I know are not for this, and I respect that. I would have a lot of questions as to how this would happen. I understand and respect why they wouldn't. Teachers were there to teach. This would be a whole different level of our job and responsibility, the liability. There's a lot of questions as to what that would look like, how that would happen. I will just say, if it were me and I was in that situation, and Sandy Hook really affected me because I do teach primary elementary school, in that moment, if it was happening in my classroom, I would rather be armed and save my kids than the alternative.
You obviously get very emotional and choked up. This is a very difficult issue. Do you want to delve into that further, why this hits home so close to you?
When it happened at Newtown, it did affect me. It was hard to watch the kids leaving the school. It could have been me with my kids and all of our staff at our school. And I don't know. I don't know what it would look like to arm teachers. There would have to be a tremendous amount of buy-in and training. I think it would have to be a local decision. I don't think the majority of teachers would want this responsibility. But like I said, even though that I'm not keen on it myself, given that moment, and if there's somebody coming in my classroom door, I would rather be armed than to be a sitting duck.
So you've thought about this. This is something you've thought about? Have other teachers as well? You guys have thought about this? Yeah.
I think arming. I don't teach math. I have a bulletproof vest. I carry 2 magazines. I have plus my magazine in my gun. Every day, I do help and teach in certain classes too, but I'm there as a resource. But I also, my job is I think differently than teachers think on a daily basis. I look at what they don't think is a big deal. I think it's a big deal even though it turns into nothing, right? Why was that door left open? Who is this person that came into the school? Why is there a car in the back that no one told me about is there? Because I think of always the worst case scenarios. And it didn't work in the Wild West. It's not necessarily going to work now. I think that's a Band-Aid effect. There's a bigger thing. We have fire codes nationally, but we have 0 threat assessment codes in schools. So schools need to be more secure, but still be positive learning environments. Putting guns in teachers' hands, I don't think creates that positive learning environment. We could arm everybody. That's not going to be the answer either. And once you're in that confrontation, the amount of training they would have to do, are they going to train? They're going to have to train with us. Rural areas are different than city areas of where people would be with fire if there's no cops in the school or anything like that. I do like the idea of an armed guard, somebody in every single school, whether it's a SRO, a school resource officer, retired military, retired police, somebody with the acumen that can do it. There are some teachers that do have that acumen as well, and like you said, a local level. But the school I work in, I wouldn't want teachers being armed. Also at the same point, I don't know at that point, if the teacher's right there when it happens or is protecting their classroom, that could work as a positive. But once shots are fired and the melee's going on, people like me are running towards that, and anybody with a gun in their hand, and now I'm going to have to second guess why excuse me, math teacher has a gun in his. I know he's the guy with the gun, but
sure. How about students?
Yeah.
What do students think about this? Would you want your teachers to be armed?
I just think about all the possibilities that would be a ripple effect of it. I think about how easy it is for kids to get their hands on anything nowadays. At my school, we've cracked the Wi-Fi passwords, we've cracked the laptop codes, we've cracked everything you can imagine, and I just don't see where a gun could be safely locked up and secured. It could be in a safe in the administrator's office, in the teacher's desk, hidden. It will get out. It always ends up getting out.
You know, as a teacher, I think about what I do every day, my job. I've only been teaching for 4 years, and each year I have had things added to my plate without any extra time to figure them out. I saw a meme the other day, right? Like, no one's even trained me to use the copier. Someone's gonna train me to use a gun. Like, that matches up to my lived experience. We have so many things on our plates at all times, and is protecting students one of them? Absolutely. But I trust in the protocols that have been set up in my school district. I have a school resource officer who does an amazing job of getting to know our students and keeps them safe in the day-to-day, not just in the case of some kind of an emergency. When I leave my classroom thinking about another thing to lock up, do I leave sub-plans for somebody about how a gun would be used in my classroom? What are the odds that the person with the gun is going to be in the right place at the right time? I only see it as another opportunity for mistakes, for accidents, and for unintended consequences to occur.
I'm for arming teachers who want to be armed. I don't think that it should be mandatory. I absolutely believe that Maine is a local control state, and I think that we should stay that way. As was outlined previously, we have a lot of differences in rural Maine versus, a place like Portland or South Portland. And so there are differences in what would be required depending on what school district you're in. I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there about what it is like to carry a concealed firearm. And so I think that sometimes people envision that there's going to be this kindergarten teacher that's going to be going out and finding the perpetrator, when, as the person behind me said, that after you've set up all of your other things, after you've gone through all of your other protocols, you've locked your doors, you've set up your barricade, if a teacher wanted to be armed and was willing to take on that responsibility, which it is a huge responsibility, but it's something that I am telling you now that tens of thousands of Maine citizens take on every single day. And so I think that we shouldn't barricade our teachers who want to carry a firearm in the classroom appropriately with appropriate training. If they want to have that option, if there was an assailant in their room, and if the only option was either they're going to get shot and the kids in their rooms are going to get shot, or they have at least a fighting chance, then I would like to give them that chance if they want it.
All right, we got to move on to final thoughts right here. I'd love to start right here and just work our way down. Everyone could share your message. Right now, Maine is watching. Your officials will see this as well. What is the message that you want to send tonight about this topic? We'll start with you.
I just hope there's something that comes out of this, good change, whether it's on the topic of gun control. I'm not an expert on guns, like somebody else here said. I'm not an expert. I just know something needs to change. And then on the mental health side of it, something needs to change. Us students, us kids, when it comes to social media, when it comes to everything that's put on our plates nowadays, it's crushing us. I see it every day in all the kids in my school. It really hurts. I think something needs to be changed, whether it's at locally schools with teachers doing, I say more, they do so much to begin with.
Sure, about 2 minutes left. I want to make sure everyone gets to say something. What's your message tonight?
I just think when it comes to arming teachers, I think the stakes are too high. I don't think there should be guns in our schools. I think there's no reason for that. Kids are trying to learn, teachers are trying to teach, and that's what needs to happen in our schools. We shouldn't be worried about guns and who has them. I think change needs to happen, like he said, and I think that our young people are doing a really good job of making that happen, and I think we're on the right track.
Okay, your message.
What we're seeing right now from students, the way they're standing up, I think is unprecedented, and I think our legislators need to take that into account. They need to listen to that, and they need to consider ways that we can make healthy change.
Final thought?
Two things that can happen in school right now as we speak. They need to increase SROs and definitely work on entrance and exits, because there's certain things that can happen right now as we're talking that can definitely save lives in the future, and this conversation can't stop here.
Okay. To an SRO now.
Secure our schools better, restorative justice, listen to the youth, very important. No one's been killed with a fire since the late 1950s in the school. We need to work on that on the school shooting side.
I think that, as has been evidenced here, that everybody wants all of our kids to be safe. I think that we do have different ways of approaching that, but I think it's important for everybody to have that final conclusion in mind, that we're not against each other. We're all for the safety of the kids in our schools, and it doesn't have to be one solution. It can be several solutions.
Okay. About 30 seconds left, yeah.
Just be more, and I really plead to parents to be more involved in their children's lives, particularly with the area of social media and technology. I think third graders that I have, having a Facebook account is inappropriate. Violent video games, anything in moderation. Just be more involved in your kids' lives.
Okay, we got about a sentence each. Real quick, go ahead.
I think these kids are exemplary citizens, and they are going to drive change that we really need in our country. And I agree, we all want the same things.
All right, we are out of time. Guys, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. We appreciate you joining us as well. The conversation continues on Facebook.
Thank you to our panel as well, and thank you for watching us at home.